welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're dissecting a claim that is truly extraordinary. We're looking at the alleged discovery of the Ark of the Covenant's original manufacturing site, specifically a 3,400-year-old industrial metal forge supposedly found in the Arabian desert. Our sources for this are all centered on assertions from Jim and his team, who are, building on the earlier work of Ron Wyatt. This all comes from a visit they made in 2022. And our mission today isn't really to prove or disprove this. It's to dig into the very specific evidence they're presenting. We're talking about a huge metalworking site, high-heat furnaces, and this is the amazing part, stone molds, they say, match the exact technical specs for the Cherubim Wings from the book of Exodus. So for you listening, this is about getting into the weeds on a find that could, if it's real, completely merge technical archaeology with the biblical narrative.
And right off the bat, we have to talk about geography, because none of this works without a pretty radical relocation of Mount Sinai itself.
Right. Forget the traditional spot in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula.
Completely. This source places the real mountain in the northwest corner of Saudi Arabia, right there at the Gulf of Aqaba.
That is a massive claim on its own. So what's their justification for moving it there, even before we get to the forge?
Well, they argue the entire landscape just fits the Exodus story perfectly. They point to a specific sea crossing location, a famous split rock where water supposedly came from, and critically, the mountain itself.
The mountain.
The peak is still visibly burned, scorched. They say it's from the divine fire described in the Bible, so that whole environment sets the stage. But it also creates a huge problem of scale they have to solve.
The scale, yes.
Right.
The idea of 3 million people camping in the desert for a year, the logistics are just mind-boggling. So what did this encampment area actually look like?
That's where the geography comes back in. The sources describe these vast open plains stretching for miles and miles. Plenty of room for an entire nation.
So it's physically possible.
It's plausible, yes. And they say other markers are still there. The site of the golden calf altar, Moses' altar. You can even see where a brook bed and a lake used to be, thousands of years later.
Okay, so the location is at least a candidate. Now, let's get to the moment that sparks this whole industrial project. Moses gets the 10 Commandments, and the people are, they're terrified.
Right. They are terrified. They fall back, and Moses goes up the mountain alone. And the very first thing he's told, it's not another law, it's a command to build something.
Make me a sanctuary.
Exactly, a physical structure. And this means a massive, immediate construction project using the materials they had on hand.
Which were specific metals they were told to collect as offerings.
Very specific. Gold, silver, and brass. And it's probably worth clarifying for you, when the text from that era says brass, it almost certainly means copper or bronze.
An alloy of copper and tin.
Right. Modern brass with zinc is much later, so this means they needed the ability to work with bronze on a huge scale, which is much more complex than just melting down gold.
And this wasn't just some improvised design. There was a blueprint, a divine one.
An exact blueprint. Moses is told very explicitly, make it according to the pattern I'm showing you on the mountain. He was replicating the tabernacle that is in heaven.
So there's zero room for error. Every piece has to be perfect.
Which is an incredible engineering constraint. And for a job like that, you need a master craftsman.
Which brings us to Bezalel.
Bezalel, yeah. His job description is basically divine. He's called by name and filled with a divine spirit of wisdom, understanding, and knowledge to invent in every work.
So the scripture itself is telling us that this required highly technical, specialized metal production.
Exactly. It sets the expectation. And that's what makes the 2022 discovery so compelling. They weren't even looking for it.
They just stumbled upon it.
Completely by accident. They were just driving back toward the mountain and saw something that, didn't look like just a pile of rocks, and they realized this was it. The metalworks area.
The factory for the tabernacle.
You could call it that, yeah. Let's think about the scope of work here. The tabernacle is huge, about 171 by 85 feet. That means thousands of standardized parts. Pins, rods, hooks, sockets.
All made of metal.
All made of metal and precisely sized. Just think about the bronze sockets for the foundation. There were 96 of them, each weighing about 100 pounds.
That's almost 5 tons of bronze just for the socket.
5 tons. So you need an immense amount of heat constantly to produce that. This isn't some small campfire forge. This is industrial.
Okay, so let's get to the furnace. The main structure they found. How could it possibly generate and sustain the temperatures they needed?
They describe a circular structure, maybe 15 feet across, 5 feet high. But the key is how it was built. It's made of precisely laid stones, and the design is all about regulating oxygen flow.
Which is the critical factor for heat.
Mhm.
To melt gold, you need what, almost 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit?
1,948 degrees, to be exact. And maintaining that kind of temperature, I mean, today we'd use massive forced air bellows.
Which they didn't have. So how do they do it? How do they explain getting that kind of heat without that technology?
This is the core of their claim. They argue the structure's design itself, the way the stones were laid, created a kind of high-efficiency chimney effect. It maximized the natural draft, pulling air through the charcoal to get it incredibly hot.
A passive
A
system.
passive but highly engineered system. And the evidence inside, they say, supports this. They found a very fine gray ash, totally different from the sand around it, which suggests a really controlled high-temperature burn.
And it wasn't just one furnace, right? They would have needed a whole setup.
Absolutely. The team identified at least 4 or 5 other furnaces of different sizes. You'd need separate ones for silver, which melts at a lower temp, for bronze, and even kilns for baking the ceramic crucibles and molds. It was a whole industrial park.
So from the industrial park to the actual artifacts, tell me about the stone forms, the molds they found.
They found them about 20 to 25 feet away from the main furnace.
Which seems strategic.
Very. Close enough to work with the molten metal before it cools, but far enough to be safe from that intense 2,000-degree heat. The first type they found were for pretty standard components, molds for pouring gold into rings, clips, the decorative pomegranates.
The mass-produced parts, so to speak.
Exactly. But then they found another stone form, a much more significant one, and this is the one that connects directly to the Ark of the Covenant itself.
To the cherubim.
Yes. The command was to make 2 cherubs of beaten gold to go on top of the mercy seat. And that's a very specific term, not cast gold, beaten gold.
And this second stone form was for that process, for hammering, not pouring.
That's the claim. This mold was the template for the cherub wing. The process would have been totally different. You'd pour a sheet of gold, let it cool just enough to be malleable, then lay that hot sheet over this stone form.
And hammer it into shape.
You'd hammer it into the precise convex shape of the wing. And that process, the hammering, it compresses the metal, makes it denser, shinier. It creates that beaten gold finish.
Okay, but this stone has been sitting in the desert for 3,400 years. What details could possibly still be visible that would convince them it was a wing?
Well, according to the source, even with all that erosion, you can still see faint lines etched into the stone, feather lines. And they curve perfectly. They also identified what looks like the attachment point where the wing would join the cherub's body. To them, this was it, the fingerprint of Scripture in stone.
Wow. Okay, but there's a problem of scale again. If the ark was 2.5 cubits long, how do they know this mold is the right size? That feels like it would be impossible to prove.
This is maybe the strongest part of their argument, because they use the Bible's own measurements to check the artifact.
They use math.
They used math. So Exodus 25 gives the ark's length as 2.5 cubits. That's about 59 inches. For the 2 cherubim wings to overshadow the mercy seat correctly, meeting in the middle, they had to calculate the required arc and angle.
So they basically reverse engineered the wing from the biblical dimensions.
Exactly. They ran the calculation using the Pythagorean theorem and determined that for everything to fit perfectly, each wing had to be exactly 36 inches long. 3 feet. That was the number they needed to find.
So did the mold match?
This is the amazing part. One of Jim's colleagues he placed his boot next to the mold. His boot was a foot long. The wing mold was exactly 3 boot lengths long.
36 inches.
36 inches on the dot. I mean, that's the kind of direct correlation between an engineering calculation from the biblical text and a physical artifact that, well, it makes you stop and think, regardless of what you believe.
That is an astonishing level of specificity. And the timeline fits, too. The Israelites were camped at this one spot long enough to get all this done.
Oh, absolutely. Scripture says they were there for over a year. The tabernacle was built and then officially set up for Passover in the first month of the second year. They didn't leave until the next month, so the entire fabrication and assembly process happened right there, in front of the mountain.
So the physical claims, at least according to the source, line up with the scriptural text and timeline. But let's shift gears. What's the deeper meaning here? Why would uncovering these ancient blueprints matter today?
Well, the source argues that the command to make me a sanctuary was always about more than just the building. It had a dual meaning.
A physical and a spiritual one.
Exactly. While the physical tabernacle was being built with fire and hammers, the real project was the refinement of the people of Israel themselves.
So the metalworking process is a metaphor.
A direct metaphor. The text talks about Jehovah purifying Israel as silver or gold. The intense heat of the furnace, the precise measurements, the hammering, it all mirrors the trials and purification the people had to go through to become this kingdom of priests. The building was the object lesson.
So finding the forge isn't just a historical curiosity. In their view, it's a message for today.
That's their explicit takeaway. They see these finds as a kind of final evidence that Scripture is true, designed to wake people up in our time. The discovery is meant to validate the literal truth of Exodus so that people will take the spiritual message, refining by fire, seriously in their own lives.
Okay, so let's just recap the core claims here for everyone. We have the alleged relocation of Mount Sinai to Saudi Arabia, evidence of industrial-scale metallurgy capable of hitting nearly 2,000 degrees, and the discovery of stone molds that they claim match the exact size 36 inches, and the hammered construction required for the Ark's Cherubim Wings.
And if those technical claims are verifiable, if you can really take the measurements from Exodus 25, do the math, and see it reflected in a stone artifact at that site, it would suggest the ancient text isn't just a story, it's an engineering manual.
And as we close out this deep dive, the final argument is that this ancient engineering manual is tied directly to a future event.
Yes. The source proposes that the whole point of the physical ark was to prepare people for the spiritual reality, that they are the sanctuary, and that process of purification of being refined is still happening.
And the provocative thought they leave you with.
It's that uncovering these ancient blueprints now is a sign that, as they put it, his glory will soon be revealed. They see it as the sign of the Son of Man that the whole world will see. And that promise of a precise, globally witnessed event tied directly to the engineering specs found at this mountain really makes you wonder, what other technical details from our ancient past might be blueprints for our future?